The morning everything flipped, I was just an old guy on a quiet shoreline, sitting at the end of my dock with a mug of coffee, watching Lake Briarwood throw back the sunrise in little shards of gold, and thinking, not for the first time, that maybe, after decades of concrete dust and overtime, I'd finally done one thing right in my life. Then I heard heels on wood, sharp, angry, getting closer, and the piece snapped like a twig. Down the path came Veronica Hale, HOA president of Silver Shore Landing HOA, wrapped in an oversized sun hat and ego, clutching a folder so thick it looked weaponized, papers flapping like little white flags that were definitely not about surrender. She marched straight onto the public easement line, planted herself at the edge of my dock like she owned the lake, and shoved a notice toward my face. "You have 24 hours to vacate this dock," she announced, voice carrying across Silver Shore Landing like a siren, "or the HOA will begin fines and legal action." I looked at the paper, then at her, then back at my dock. The one I, Ethan Cole, had built board by board, with county permits, state inspections, and the kind of care you only put into something that represents your whole second half of life. I didn't say much, just took a slow sip of coffee, so she couldn't see the smile starting at the corner of my mouth, because I knew something she didn't. Within an hour, she'd be screaming over something a lot more valuable than my dock. Her boat. See, I'm 58, semi-retired from 30-plus years in construction, 2 kids grown, grandkids starting to show up on holidays. And when I bought this small, slightly beat-up house on Lake Briarwood, I didn't care that it wasn't the biggest place on the shore. I cared that for once, the view in front of me wasn't a job site. The dock I built became my front porch to the world. I taught my grandson to tie a fishing knot there, listened to frogs confess their sins at night there, sat with my feet in the water when I couldn't sleep. Then there was Veronica, mid-40s, always dressed like a real estate magazine cover instead of someone who lives near water, clipboard glued to her hand like it was a royal scepter. Her place, huge, perfect, sterile, sat 3 lots down, and out front, like a trophy on wheels, was her gleaming, oversized boat, the pride of Silver Shore Landing, polished so often I'm surprised there was any paint left on it. Before she noticed me, life here was simple. I swapped tools with old Frank Miller next door, ate pie from the Dawsons down the street, talked about fish, weather, grandkids. Nobody cared if a lawn went shaggy for a week. Nobody but Veronica. To her, power meant catching a mailbox painted the wrong white, then sending a violation at 7 a.m. What made me a target was simple. I didn't orbit her. My dock was permitted through the county, every measurement double-checked, inspector's signature framed in my file drawer, but because it hadn't passed through Veronica Hale, HOA president of Silver Shore Landing HOA, it was non-compliant. One yellow HOA envelope turned into a stack. Unauthorized structure, aesthetics, threat to property values. I tried the respectful route. I brought the permits to a board meeting. She didn't even glance at them. "Our standards," she said, "are higher than the county's." Translation: my authority matters more than the law. That dock wasn't just planks to me. It was what I'd earned. So when she stood there that morning, waving my eviction from my own shoreline, threatening fines and legal hell, I felt that old job site anger flash, but I shoved it down, because behind it, something calmer, colder, had already started forming. She wanted to take my dock. I was about to take her boat. The first time she really overplayed her hand was the final notice. Silver Shore Landing HOA logo stamped across the top. Bold letters declaring my dock unsafe, non-compliant, subject to removal, as if she were a judge signing an eviction order on a piece of my soul. By then, I'd had a sheriff out, Deputy Mark Ruiz, good guy, bounced on my dock a couple times, laughed, said it was sturdier than half the county's bridges, and left shaking his head about anonymous complaints. I knew who Anonymous was. That night, instead of stewing, I did what I've always done when someone tries to bully me. I read the fine print. I pulled out the Silver Shore Landing HOA bylaws, that giant binder most folks shove in a junk drawer, and started flipping. Docks, boats, shoreline use. Half of it sounded like it was written by a bored lawyer, but then one line snagged me like a treble hook. All watercraft must be registered with state authorities and with Silver Shore Landing HOA. Unauthorized storage or docking of unregistered vessels is prohibited and subject to immediate impound. Unregistered. Next morning, I drove down to the county office, gave the clerk Veronica's address, and asked to confirm her boat registration. A few keystrokes, a frown, a screen turned my way. "No record," she said. "Not under that name. Not for this county." On the way home, I flipped through the bylaws again. Dock extensions required full board approval. I'd sat through enough HOA meetings to know I'd never seen a vote on that giant pier-sized platform Veronica used for her parties. Later, Frank Miller ambled over and quietly mentioned that the slice of shoreline where she kept that boat wasn't actually her lot. It was common HOA property, technically off-limits for personal storage. Unregistered boat, unauthorized dock extension, personal toy tied to association land. Everything she accused me of, she was drowning in. From that point, my anger cooled into focus. I took photos of her dock from every angle, measured the extension, printed county records showing no registration, pulled Silver Shore Landing HOA minutes to prove no vote on her build. I timestamped everything. My little folder turned into a binder that could crack drywall. Then I took it to a real lawyer, attorney Lydia Grant, local property specialist who'd seen more than her share of HOA games. She flipped through my evidence, smiled in that slow, dangerous way, and said, "Mr. Cole, not only do you have grounds to fight her, you can ask the association to enforce their own rules." "You mean?" "I mean," she said, tapping the clause, "if that vessel isn't registered properly and it's stored on association land, Silver Shore Landing HOA can order it impounded. And any member in good standing," she added, looking at me, "can request enforcement." The irony almost knocked me over. The woman threatening to strip me of my dock was sitting on an illegal monument to herself, and the rulebook she worshipped gave me the right to take it away. But I didn't rush. Lydia helped me file the right paperwork with the county and the HOA, all clean, signed, stamped. Meanwhile, I talked to neighbors, on docks, in driveways, at the bait shop, and discovered what I'd suspected. Everyone had a Karen story. Bird feeders too decorative. Shutters too cheerful. Kids' toys visual clutter. She'd run Silver Shore Landing like a tiny kingdom, and people were tired. The next HOA meeting was the perfect stage. I called a marine tow company, Harbor Lift Recovery, the kind that specializes in boat impounds, and lined them up to be on standby. At the meeting, I sat near the back, binder in my lap, while Veronica strutted in wearing a navy suit and a smile like she'd already won. She launched into her speech, projectors showing pictures of my dock at bad angles, calling it unsafe, an eyesore, a threat to property values. She proposed immediate legal action. Her loyalists clapped on cue. When she finally paused, I stood and walked to the front. "You're right about one thing," I said, voice steady. "Rules matter, and they apply to everyone." I opened the binder. First photo, her dock extension, measurements highlighted, minutes with no record of approval. Second, county record search showing no registered boat in her name. Third, her boat, tied to Silver Shore Landing HOA common shoreline. Bylaws clause projected right beside it. Murmurs. Gasps. A couple neighbors actually laughed. For the first time since I'd known her, Veronica Hale, HOA president, looked rattled. "This is irrelevant," she snapped, voice pitching up. "We're here about your dock." "No," I said quietly. "We're here about abuse of power." And right on cue, there was a knock at the door. Two guys from Harbor Lift Recovery stepped in with clipboards. "We're here on an impound order for an unregistered vessel," one said. The room went dead silent, then exploded as everyone surged out toward the lake. We all stood there on the shoreline of Lake Briarwood as they hooked her gleaming pride and joy to the tow rig. Veronica was screaming at them, at me, at the board, at the sky, calling it theft, threatening lawsuits, shouting, "Do you know who I am?" The tow driver just pointed at the paperwork with the HOA seal and county stamp. I stood on my dock, coffee in hand, watching her boat roll away up the hill while my illegal dock sat there solid under my feet. She tried to evict me from my own peace. In 1 hour, her boat was the one that ended up homeless. The days after felt like a pressure valve finally hissing open over Silver Shore Landing. For the first time in months, I walked to the end of my dock without looking over my shoulder, just me, the water, and the soft slap of waves under the boards. No clipped heels, no megaphone voice, no shiny boat moored so close I could smell the polish. Word spread faster than any violation notice ever had. Neighbors who'd never said more than hello showed up at my door with pies, beers, nervous little smiles. Old Frank Miller sat beside me on the dock one evening, handed me a bottle, and said, "I've lived here 20 years, Ethan, and I've never seen anybody stand up to her like that. You didn't just save your dock. You gave the rest of us a spine. I don't know about that, but I do know this. Once people saw the Queen bleed, they stopped bowing. For a couple of weeks, Veronica tried to claw her way back. Emergency meetings nobody attended. Angry emails about unfair enforcement. Appeals over her boat that went nowhere. Because the law is the law, even when you've been pretending you're above it. The Silver Shore Landing HOA board finally did what they should have done years earlier. They called for a vote of no confidence. The same neighbors who once nodded along with her now raised their hands to remove her as HOA president. Just like that, the clipboard lost its magic. She was no longer the voice of community standards. She was just another homeowner with a stack of her own violation notices and an empty spot where her boat used to sit. By the end of summer, her unauthorized dock extension was ordered scaled back. Fines for misuse of HOA land and improper registration started piling up, and rumor had it she was spending more time with lawyers than with her precious shoreline parties. Eventually, the for sale sign went up in front of her immaculate house. A few months later, the lights were off for good. The new HOA president, a quieter guy named Harold Benton, came down to my place one afternoon, hat in hand, apology ready. On behalf of Silver Shore Landing HOA, he said, "We're done with the war. We'd like to fix what she broke and move on." They backed it up, too. The board walked the shoreline, rewrote dock rules to actually match county law, dropped every bogus fine on my account, and made sure nobody's bird feeder or shutter color was going to be treated like a constitutional crisis again. Life on Lake Briarwood slid back into what it was supposed to be. I rebuilt a few sections of my dock, added extra braces just because I take pride in the work, and started teaching my grandkids how to cast off the end without hooking each other's ears. Some evenings, I sit there alone, listening to the water, thinking about how close I came to just ripping the dock out to keep the peace, and how wrong that kind of peace really is. Every now and then I see a car that looks like Veronica's drive past the subdivision entrance, slowing down like a ghost checking on its old kingdom, then speeding up again when it realizes nobody's watching anymore. Do I feel joy at how hard she fell? A little. I'm human. But more than that, I feel a kind of quiet satisfaction that we proved something bigger than one dock or one boat. That power built on fear and double standards can't stand forever if somebody, anybody, is willing to dig into the rules and say, no, they apply to you too. Because in the end, this wasn't just about wood and water. It was about a simple idea I wish I'd learned earlier in life. Bullies don't stop until someone makes them. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do isn't shout back. It's calmly pull out the paperwork and let their own hypocrisy sink them. So here's what I'm still chewing on, and what I want to throw to you watching this. When someone like Veronica Hale uses rules and titles to control everyone around them, is it enough to just protect yourself? Or is there a moral obligation to push back hard, even if it means watching them lose something they love as much as she loved that boat? Was what I did simply fair justice? Or was seizing her boat a step too far, even for a bully who tried to evict me from my own dock?